So welcome to Petworth House. Petworth House has been here since the 12th century, but how you see it today is very much thanks to the Duke and Duchess of Somerset in the 1680s and 1690s. We have here one of the greatest treasure houses in the National Trust's ownership, one of the best collections, if not the best collection of art in the National Trust. And it's thanks to the generations of Percy, Somerset and Wyndham families who have built up this collection of art since they owned the property in the 12th century. In particular, the 3rd Earl of Egremont, who lived in the late 18th and early 19th century, heralded a golden age for Petworth, creating some of the best art gallery spaces that you will see in this house, and commissioned Turner to paint 4 works of art specifically for the carved room here at Petworth, but also in total the 3rd Earl owned over 20 paintings by Turner. And this room itself was created, as you see it today, by the 3rd Earl of Egremont, who commissioned Turner to create these works of art, these paintings to go in this space. And the Chichester Canal, as I say, is just one of 4 paintings that we have here represented, and they're all positioned, as you can see, quite low in the room. They're positioned specifically so that those that were dining in this space, this is a dining room, could be sitting looking at them at their eye level. And they are also meant to reflect an opportunity to have views for the diners that are sitting with their backs to the windows. So those that are looking out onto the landscape can see the real views of Petworth Park, and those that are facing towards the wall can have the most glorious views of Turner's own paintings, both of Petworth Park, but also of the Egremont's wider estate, which included not necessarily an ownership, but investment, places like Chichester Canal, which the 3rd Earl himself invested in the building of. So the investment didn't go so well because the canal was set up originally as a connection between the south coast up to the Wey and Arun Canal and then to the Wey navigations up to the Thames to create a route for commercial and military activity, particularly during the Napoleonic Wars between France and England during the late 18th and early 19th century. The actual work did not get completed in time before the war finished, but also the 3rd Earl withdrew his own investments. That said, it was still something he was proud of being involved in, and actually we know that when Turner created these series of views for the carved room, he came up with, dare I say, an options appraisal for the 3rd Earl, in that there wasn't just the 4 views that you see here today, there was 6 to 8 different versions that were probably discussed with the 3rd Earl, which pieces he preferred, which versions or compositions he preferred. And so we know that there was definitely a sense of interest from the 3rd Earl for representing his wider achievements. Likewise, the other painting in here, which represents more than the immediate estate, is the Brighton Change Pier, which again the 3rd Earl invested in. So it's showing his wider social involvement in Sussex and the landscape and the industry in the county. You have the most wonderful example of Turner's working and thinking as an artist in the oil sketch that is being borrowed for the exhibition at Pallant House, because where you see the differences between a preliminary sketch and the final version, you can see the changes in the artist's mind and understanding the composition, what works. And so it's very subtle actually with this painting, the differences. Some of the trees have slightly moved, maybe the angle and the perspective has been changed. It's largely the same composition, but it's small details, like the tone of the whole piece is much softer. The position of some of the trees on this side and the banks, again, has either been brought forward or widened, actually. So there's a much more dramatic positioning of the landscape here. And it's partly due to the format. We call it a double square format. So it's almost super realistic in terms of where the eye and the vision will go, more so than a normal canvas may give that opportunity for. And so what Turner's doing here is really perfecting his art, and he was known to not only do this in the initial sketches, but also after a painting may even have been hung on the wall and framed. and perhaps coming back to make small modifications and alterations, because he saw this alongside the three other paintings in this room, and also as part of this composition. The shape is also replicating the paintings above. He's looking at how the effect will be in the room, the slight adjustments he might make to the tone, to the surface, to the colour on the canvas as well. Turner was known for his use of colour and tone and creating quite a vivid expression on the canvas as well. He elevated landscape painting to be on par with history painting in his lifetime, and he's bringing that kind of drama to the fore here. So the view, depending on where he could get, I mean, he's in a very unrealistic position, yes, on a bridge, but also almost the viewer is floating in the water. So you're not getting the same kind of realistic view that you might get if you were to stand there and to take a photograph. It's absolutely about heightening that drama.
The room that we're standing in here is the old library, which was built by the Duke and Duchess of Somerset in the 1690s, but it's probably most famous as the room which was used by J.M.W. Turner and lots of other artists who visited the house in the early 19th century. So this was the room which almost certainly the Chichester Canal sketch was begun in, and even conceivably the finished version downstairs was also worked on in here. So it's a very special space. It's almost tailor-made as an artist studio. It couldn't have been a more appropriate space, and actually mirrors quite closely some of the spaces which we know Turner in particular designed for himself for use in London as studios, particularly in the sense that it has an east-facing window, which he seemed to like. Turner, like many artists, was drawn to Sussex in general. In actual fact, of the English counties, Sussex is the third best represented county by Turner. So he definitely liked this general area. And of course, the long coastline, the great social history appealed to him of the county, but it was also in relative striking distance of London, 40 odd miles away. Despite the fact that the roads were notoriously bad coming into Sussex, but Turner didn't really put him off. According to some of Turner's contemporaries, the paintings downstairs in the carve room and indeed the preliminary sketches were actually worked on in this room. That group of paintings is particularly interesting because it's a very rare instance of Turner producing work for a specific space. It's something which only really happened once before at Harewood House in Yorkshire, many decades before. And the other interesting thing about that group generally is that it's a very rare occurrence of Turner producing full-scale sample studies to show to a prospective client, in this case the 3rd Earl of Egremont. Although that's something which he did reasonably frequently with watercolour, it's very, very rare for him to do that with oil paintings. And the sketch for the Chichester Canal, therefore, is very vibrant. It's not highly finished like the one in the carve room is, and also it's survived a lot better because there's less paint on it. The finished versions in the carve room have discoloured and cracked to a certain degree, as is often the case with Turner's very highly finished pictures. But the oil sketches do tend to survive better because they're more thinly painted. This really was an exceptional arrangement here. Bearing in mind that Turner had already sold a number of paintings to Egremont. By the time we get to the Carve Room Commission in the late 1820s, the two of them are on very close terms. And we do really get the sense that it was very much a collaboration, that entire project, which is extremely rare for Turner. Although it does really reflect more broadly the sort of thing which was happening in British art by the earlier decades of the 19th century, whereby the artists were beginning to converse and deal with their patrons on a more equal footing. Whereas previously in the 18th century, of course, it had very much been a client and an artist relationship. By the early 19th century, the social status of the artist had risen to such an extent that they were able to have those sorts of conversations more freely with clients. But for Turner in particular, it was quite a rare thing.